Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back. Today we're going to talk a bit about MMOs, which, what a topic, right? You know, with the recent implosion of Ashes of Creation, the halting of further development on New World, and last year's gutting of numerous in-development MMOs, yeah, I wouldn't blame you for having a rather grim outlook on this genre. Although there are still new games on the horizon for us to look forward to, which I covered a few weeks back in another video. That said, it's true that, it's kind of been a rough period in the world of new upcoming MMOs. But also, let us not forget all of the existing games, the ones that have maintained player bases and received regular content updates for the past 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years in some cases. Today, that's what I want to talk about, because there's a lot of good out here, and you may very well be missing out on experiencing what could be your next favorite MMO, simply because it's not a brand spanking new MMO, but I don't think you should let that dissuade you. These games are popular and continue to receive updates for a reason. That reason is they're actually good games. I know, shocker, the internet can often convince you that every game out there sucks and the games industry is awful right now. It's not true, however. People are in fact out here enjoying video games in the year of our Lord 2026. It's really happening. I'm really having fun playing games, believe it or not. So yeah, maybe today I can help you discover or even refine an MMO for you to enjoy this year. Let's jump into it. Starting with Guild Wars 2, I did a revisit of this game a couple of months ago and had an absolutely fantastic time playing over the course of a few weeks, leveling up a couple of characters, doing the whole endgame gearing thing, which is pretty straightforward and simple. One of the pros / cons, depending on your opinion, of this more kind of horizontal progression that Guild Wars offers. For me, I really like it. Every time I come back to the game, I feel like not that far behind. I can just do whatever the new stuff is and not worry about running a new treadmill. One of the advantages that Guild Wars 2 has over the vertical progression MMOs. And yeah, I did check out a bit of endgame in the process as well, doing a few different various endgame group activities. Gotta say, overall, I think this game has just held up incredibly well and still has some of the best form of quest presentation that incentivizes world exploration, because they don't do questing hubs really in Guild Wars 2, you know, where you go to a town, you talk to a bunch of NPCs, you pick up their quest, you go out, you do the thing, and then you return to them. No, the quest in this game are largely just you exploring the world and doing stuff while out there. The one exception to this really would be the main story quest lines of each of the various expansions in the main game, but beyond that, it really is just a game about exploring the world and doing stuff within it, then being rewarded experience, currency, and loot in the process. They've got this whole map completion mechanic that has you wanting to visit every nook and cranny of every zone in the game, clearing out the heart quest, discovering the points of interest, visiting the vistas and getting the nice view, collecting hero points to make your character more powerful, doing jumping puzzles just because they're fun. Just go out, explore, fight things, do stuff, and you get rewarded in the process. And this presentation and the reward structure have made it so satisfying to explore zones. It's literally the main thing that I enjoy doing in this game, even more so than any of the endgame group PvE or PvP activities. I just like leveling characters and clearing the open world maps, genuinely, to the point where I will make new characters of classes that I already have at max level whenever I come back to the game, just because I like playing those classes and I like clearing the world maps. Also, hands down, Guild Wars 2 has some of the best feeling mounts in any MMO I've ever played. It's really hard to describe other than they've got a real physicality, and it really feels like you're riding an animal rather than a vehicle that moves you at X% speed. It's really something if you haven't checked it out. So what is new for the game? Well, last fall they released Visions of Eternity. This came with a brand new story campaign taking you through 2 brand new zones, 9 elite specializations, which are essentially new play styles, one for every class in the game. They did some updates to a few of the mounts. There was new homestead locations for player housing, new masteries, features, and loot to collect, and then also some graphical updates. And I will say, just in general, with every new big update and expansion that Guild Wars 2 gets, the game keeps looking better and better, kind of supported by a really good art style. And then throughout the course of 2026, as part of this expansion, we're going to be getting some additional story content, a few more new zones, as well as new raids, features, and additional loot. Even just going back and playing the base game, I have a lot of fun every single time, and the fact that it's still getting regular updates I think is fantastic. I just really enjoy this game. I also wanted to add that in my recent revisit, I finally got around to trying out the action combat mode over the game's sort of traditional tab targeting system. I fell in love with it. So what it does is it will lock your mouse to control the character movement instead of being free floating. So as you turn your mouse, your character and the camera move, and then left click clicking instead of clicking on an object in the environment. Left click becomes your basic attack. Honestly, this is now my preferred way to play. I enjoyed it that much, so really worth giving a shot if you happen to jump back into the game. All right, next up we've got the Elder Scrolls Online. This one gets a lot of hate, but it is legitimately a good and fun MMO that is very rich with content and lots of stuff to do. Now, yes, somewhat floaty combat is a real issue. It's not just a gripe that you hear from everybody. Like, it's a real thing, and I notice it as well. But it's not horrendous. It just basically, the combat in ESO falls short of the combat feel in some of the other big games that we're talking about on today's list. But I don't think it's awful. It's just not as good as I would like it to be. Also, it's worth noting, this year in particular, they are addressing combat and doing things to try to improve its feel. That aside though, again, as an MMO, ESO gets a lot right and has brought me hundreds of hours of entertainment through the years as a result. I think especially the core zones, they have a real strong Elder Scrolls vibe that lend themselves to a very immersive, appealing space to spend time in. It's also one of the very few MMOs that I actually enjoy listening to and engaging with some of the story content. Beyond that though, I love the overworld exploration. I like going through the delves, the public dungeons, collecting sky shards, all the while exploring some really visually interesting environments and locations. And then there's the whole PvP side of the game. The core of that is Cyrodiil, which gave me some of my most memorable moments when the game first came out. Absolutely this gargantuan zone dedicated entirely to PvP, with 3 factions fighting for territory control in an attempt to capture the capital city at the center. It's very cool stuff. I am personally less into the Zergy parts where you've got huge groups, clumps of players smashing into each other. I really prefer playing kind of on the outskirts and getting into smaller scale skirmishes, which I find very fun. Now, 2026 is a very big year for ESO as it marks a departure from what we've typically seen ZeniMax do over the past several years. So instead of kind of the typical yearly rollout of them having one big chapter and then several smaller dungeon DLCs, all with one specific theme and a whole new location and the typical assortment of content within those spaces, they're now going to be moving into a seasonal model. In the process, their main focus here, they've said, and they've shown us what they're planning. Beyond, yes, they will be adding some new content and new zones and new things to do, but they're also really going to focus on addressing some long-standing community issues with the game. These issues include, rolled out per the season, in the very first season, Season 0, which is coming up shortly, there will be a new zone. This is called the Night Market area, focuses on this challenging group events and activities. There also will be a new overland difficulty option, which they refer to as the challenge difficulty. The TLDR here is you can ramp up the difficulty of the overworld environment, making the encounters against basic enemies in the world less face rolling. You won't be 1 or 2 shotting enemies. They'll be more challenging and you're going to get more rewards as a result. The lack of difficulty while leveling is a common gripe, and directly addressing this very soon. There's also going to be some updates to the PvP progression systems, some player experience improvements with various quality of life, including free skill respecs anywhere you want, back bar XP gained, so you don't have to be on a certain bar. You got your front bar and back bar. The game has weapon swapping, and you will get experience on your back bar instead, while not having to be directly on it when you turn in a quest or farm or whatever. And then also faster mount training, which this is the thing, especially for new players, was a major pain point. And then also in Season 0, they're going to be implementing their first round of combat improvements. This is specifically coming through a complete animation overhaul to each of the classes. So they're going to start off in Season 0 with overhauling the animations and improving the feel of combat as a result for the Dragon Knight class, as well as the Werewolf kind of subclass skill tree line. And then in the following season, number 1, so we start with Season 0 and then Season 1, they're going to be doing the same thing to the Warden class. And then in Season 2, coming later this year, they'll be doing it to the Sorcerer class, and they will continue through all of the classes doing this animation overhaul, again, with the primary goal of making the combat feel better. That's great to hear. So again, Season 0 starting soon, and then a few months later, we're going to get Season 1. This will come with new stories and quests, the new system Sage's Vault, these multi-stage dynamic world events. There will also be new in-game events at the high seas and a brand new trial. And then again, the combat improvements to the Warden class, as I just mentioned. And then Season 2 will introduce brand new zones, new solo dungeons, large-scale world events, and once more, those combat improvements, animation overhauls to the Sorcerer class. I will say, along with this seasonal structure, they are adding a battle pass into the game. Everybody's favorite, right? But I think what's good here, looking at it from the proper perspective, this actually is a good thing, because in the process of adding a season pass, don't love that, but with this, go going forward, they're making it so that all of the new content, so the new zones, the new dungeons, the new features, new actual gameplay related stuff will always be free going forward. And this wasn't the case in the past. In the past, you would have to spend money to get access to some of these new areas and some of this new content. There's still going to be plenty of microtransactions in ESO. It is one of kind of the heavier handed games on this list when it comes with their monetization, but it's going to be strictly cosmetic and convenience, and they're not going to be gating content behind a paywall anymore. So yeah, I don't love that they're adding a season pass, not even a little bit, especially on a game that is already so heavily monetized, but they are removing the fact that they locked content behind monetization, and I think that is a good thing. We'll just deal with the battle pass in the process. I will say with all of this stuff, I'm very excited with my revisit that I'm planning this year for two main things. I'm excited to check out the overland difficulty options, that challenge mode, and I'm excited to get a sense and feel for the combat improvements via these animation overhauls that they're rolling out for each of the classes. Obviously, ideally, they would release just one big update where they've done a full sweep with all of the animation overhauls and say, here's our new and improved combat. It looks like it's going to be taking place over the course of a couple years, but 3 classes will be covered in this calendar year from the roadmap that they've laid out so far, so we'll see how that plays out. All right, next up, World of Warcraft. As someone who just recently emerged from a World of Warcraft-shaped hole, I'm pretty excited to talk about this game. I think it goes without saying, but look, WoW has been the king for over 2 decades now because it does a lot of stuff very right and in the process appeals to a lot of people. Never has that fact been more true than it is today with the numerous iterations of this game that are available. Of course, you've got retail WoW if you're looking for a more modern feeling game with active combat, high mobility, and loads of endgame content catering to everybody, solo players, small groups, and large-scale raids. This is hands down one of, if not the most content-rich and deep MMOs available. Again, there's a reason it's the king of the genre. New expansions come out every couple of years, adding somewhere between 8 and 10 new dungeons, multiple raid tiers, several new zones, loads of story content, and then a host of new features and content with every expansion as well. This game is huge, and it just keeps getting huger. But then also, if you're into the slower pace, back to basics, old school MMO experience, Classic WoW has you covered in its many variations. There's Classic Era, which is base World of Warcraft more or less as it was back in 2004. The Classic Progression servers, which have moved through the expansions. Currently, I believe they're on Mist of Pandaria. Then there's the released a couple years ago Classic Anniversary servers, which started as base WoW with some nice quality of life improvements, including dual specialization, and those servers just recently progressed from vanilla into the Burning Crusade. Then you've got Season of Discovery, which was Blizzard's initial stab at something like a Classic Plus, where they've got the base vanilla WoW, and then classes with new abilities, updated loot and gear sets, and even adding entirely new dungeons and raids to the game. And then lastly, you've got Hardcore WoW, which over the past couple years has been one of my favorite iterations. It is vanilla World of Warcraft, but you only have one life, and those high stakes make the game, in my experience, way more immersive and far more community focused, with players helping each other out in the world. I've just loved it. Like, I've literally fallen in love with Hardcore Classic WoW. It's a ton of fun. Now, what's new for 2026? Well, in the world of retail WoW, we're just a couple of weeks away from the release of the next expansion, Midnight. This is going to come with a new story campaign that takes us through 4 brand new zones. In those zones, you've got the usual assortment of points of interest, dungeons and raid entrances, delves, which is a new system that was added with the World Within, which is really cool, kind of solo or small group content where you move through these rooms in this dungeon-like environment. World Quest PvP events, even open world PvP if you've got that toggled on, world bosses, all the stuff, right? Midnight will also be introducing housing to World of Warcraft, where you can claim a plot, place your home, and decorate it however you like with some fairly insane levels of customization. You should see some of these videos out here with the things that people have done and the amount of variety and kind of fine-tuning and tinkering you have over this stuff. Pretty cool stuff. There's also a new spec with the Devourer Demon Hunter, this void-focused melee-ranged hybrid. All classes got an update with some pruning, removing rotation bloat. Feels a little light in the current pre-patch, and hopefully it will be better as we get more skills from 80 to 90. They're introducing this prey system where you can track enemies through the world, coming in 3 difficulties, normal, hard, and nightmare. This is also kind of a form of increasing the world difficulty with various modifiers. There's a new large-scale PvP battleground, Slayer's Ride, 40 vs 40 players, PvP training grounds where you can learn the ropes of PvP while fighting against AI enemies. They have an updated new player experience with improvements to Exile's Reach and a bunch of UI and add-on updates. I'll say, having spent the past few few days jumping back into retail, leveling a new character to 80. This literally takes like a few hours. I'm looking forward to the next expansion. I've not played retail since the Shadowlands update, and so far I've been enjoying what I've seen. I also really like the monk class, playing as the tanky brewmaster. Lots of fun. On the classic side of things, as mentioned prior, the anniversary servers recently made that transition into Burning Crusade. Probably seeing a lot of people talking about and playing that right now. I spent the past 2 months pretty deep in classic WoW. Initially this was with hardcore, and then I started leveling on the anniversary servers, getting a character ready for Burning Crusade. And I played most of the first week of that update, but I just decided to take a break, mainly because I want to get ready for the upcoming Midnight expansion for retail, but I do intend on returning. And then also for classic fans, all signs are pointing to them announcing, if not straight up releasing, Classic Plus later in this year. The idea with this is that they would take the original vanilla WoW that so many people love and expand upon its content without morphing it into retail with all of the countless changes over the past 2 decades that turned it into an entirely different game. It's a daunting task. They took some shots at it with Season of Discovery. Not everyone loved all of their decisions, but I think there was some good in there. And then we also have numerous private servers such as Turtle WoW that showcase how they could do something like a Classic Plus, along with the massively successful example set by Jagex with old school RuneScape, where they took that old game and were able to breathe fresh new life into it. 2026 might be one of the most exciting years for World of Warcraft in a very long time. It is, for at least for me personally, I'll tell you that much. Albion Online I find to be a really great chill MMO where I can just hop in, sit back, relax, gather some resources, craft some gear, do some PvE dungeons. My experience with this game has always been very laid back and enjoyable. It's got a thriving player base thanks to the fact that everybody plays on the same server. In fact, if you visit any of the main cities, there's just a ridiculous number of players running around all the time, jamming up the auction house and banks to the point where you won't even load most of them in. There's also the whole other side of this game that I've not really had too much experience with, and that is the large-scale group-focused hardcore PvP. This is a massive selling point for this game in particular, and for people who are fans of that kind of experience. Boasting massive battles with hundreds of players, it looks really neat. It's just not really my thing. I do, however, quite enjoy the small-scale PvP, as I mentioned in the ESO section. I really like that. To that end, they've got these things in this game, I think they're called corrupt dungeons or something like that, where you go in, you've got these PvE enemies and bosses, you clear through the dungeon, but you can be invaded, or you can invade other players who are also in corrupt dungeons, killing them, letting you take their stuff. And that's the kind of thing I really like in Albion and just in MMOs in general. Now, Albion's 2026 roadmap looks something like this. This month, they will be launching Realm Divided Part 2, which comes with new PvP-focused faction features. Sometime in the spring, the game's going to be getting a visual overhaul along with some performance updates. Visual overhaul sounds pretty exciting. I actually want to jump in and check that out. There's also going to be new 1v1 arena for PvP training. The game will be launching on Xbox consoles this year, and at some point in the summer, they're going to be adding this time-limited season called the Keeper event, along with the Dragons update, which is said to be a big one, although I've not read much information on it thus far. Yeah, with Albion, I just always have a fun, chill time whenever I come back to the game. I know I've not played it to the highest levels, but that doesn't really matter to me. I have a good time with the game regardless. Definitely recommend that one. All right, now it's been a couple years since I've played Black Desert Online, but I still have very fond memories of my time with this. Up until the Blackstone gear grind, I really enjoyed it. In fact, I love just about everything but how they do their gear upgrading system. It's one of those games where you're gonna find a set of gear early on, and then you spend a couple hundred hours leveling that gear up with this difficult to acquire resource. And that leveling up process sometimes has a chance to fail, which you lose the resource, and that kind of sucks. Now that said, it has been a few years, and I have heard things have changed for the better on this front, and that the pay-to-win elements in the game are not nearly as oppressive or impactful as they were in the past. I'd like to jump in and see for myself sometime soon if I can. But also, I just would love to play the game again, because again, beyond those complaints, I love just about everything else. Combat is zippy and engaging. I really enjoy exploring the world. It's got beautiful play spaces with many interesting points of interest. There's also great freedom of movement of exploration, with the game having this mantling system where you can pull yourself up onto ledges. And then beyond the third-person action combat gameplay, there's just layers upon layers of other things to do, mini games and side activities that are also entertaining. Life skills like planting crops, milking cows, and cooking. There's an entire system of worker management where you will hire workers, give them homes in the game's various cities, and provide them with jobs that they physically do in real time in the game. You can literally send a worker to go farm crops, and you can physically visit them and watch them do it, and then have those crops carted back to town. It's really cool, very immersive. Black Desert is one of those games that gets updates pretty much every single month. The most recent roadmap I could find pointed to 2026 adding. In January, they did a rework for Star's End with monster zones, group loot, guild improvements, mount growth method changes, mount item remote use, and inland fishing improvements. And then this February, there's the new season of Arena of Solaire with Node and Conquest War improvements, War of the Roses improvements, and Adania region hunting. And then in March, they've got this Altar of Blood renewal activity, along with a list of quality of life and life skill improvements. And also, this is one of those games that fairly regularly adds brand new classes. I feel like every time I hear about Black Desert Online, it's because they're adding another new class to it. The game certainly has some issues, but if you've not ever given it a shot, I do recommend giving BTO a look. Just hold tight to your wallet and try not to overspend, because they will try to get you to spend for sure. I would also like to give a shout out to Star Wars: The Old Republic. Now, I've not played this in over a decade. However, I do have fond memories with my time with the game when it first came out back in 2011 to 2013. In fact, if you go through my old content, you're going to see some like 20 plus videos that I made for this game with dungeon walkthroughs, content guides, PvP showcases, just all sorts of stuff. Like, I was properly obsessed with SWTOR. Now, from what I remember, this game played nearly identically to classic WoW, but with a Star Wars skin and far more story content and cutscenes. I just remember I was playing at a class that felt and had many abilities that were like one-for-one copies of those of the Rogue from World of Warcraft. Although, funny enough, I could also tank dungeons with this class, which was kind of cool. The fact that the game is still alive and kicking, I think, is fantastic. Now, I have heard they've made some changes, not to everyone's liking. Specifically, the base game is free, which is really cool, and you can play through your character story content and level up and do all of that stuff for free, which is a sizable amount of content. However, once you reach endgame, that's when they hit you with the paywall, to the point where you might find some purple gear and go to equip it and then realize you've got to cough up some dough in order to do so, which isn't the greatest look. But I guess, again, if the base game is free and there's tens if not hundreds of hours of entertainment with no money required to be spent, that's certainly something you could spend some time with. I would like to revisit this as well this year. I want to revisit all these games this year. It's just a matter of finding the time, really. All right, now the next two games I'm not personally familiar with, but confident enough from hearing from people that I know and trust that say they're really great options and that they would recommend them. Final Fantasy XIV, you know, I've tried over the years, but have just never really been able to get into this one. Ultimately, it boils down to the story-centric nature of this game, more specifically the sheer quantity of time spent reading NPC dialogue and watching cutscenes. Now, I am literate, I promise you, I can read. It's just that reading or watching a movie is not what I come to MMOs for, by and large. I like games that focus on exploring the world, engaging in the combat, hell, even having downtime activities, but games that focus on playing the game, not reading to you or having you watch a story. Now, that said, my particular preferences aside, by all accounts, if you do like narrative-focused games and MMOs, you might well adore Final Fantasy XIV. Many people do who aren't myself. And that's awesome. You know, not every game has to appeal to my personal sensibilities, so I am glad this thing exists and that people are really enjoying it. Now, from what I've read, see, I can read, 2026 will continue getting updates to the game for the 7.0 version or the Dawn Trail expansion, with new stuff coming up periodically in the months leading up to the end of the year. Now, the next expansion should be revealed at FanFest, with the first one in North America taking place in April, and then they expect more details to come out in July during the EU FanFest, and even more further in October during the Japanese FanFest. Then people are assuming the expansion might release either later this year, but probably more likely early in 2027. And then there is Old School Runescape, another kind of blind spot in my personal MMO history. I think like way back in the day, I played it briefly. I'm talking back in 2001, 2002, but I never stuck with it for very long, nor have I gotten around to revisiting the game. It is, however, by all accounts, one of the bigger, more successful MMOs on the market. There's certainly enough community content that I see online that leads me to believe, yes, loads of people really enjoy this game. The 2026 roadmap for OSRS looks like this. In January, they released the Deadmine Annihilation update, which was a temp game mode that flagged PvP everywhere. That's neat. Also introducing new sigils, chests, and breaches. In April, they're going to be having League 6 Return of the Echo Bosses, new tasks and relics, new demonic rewards, reimagined combat masteries. During the summertime, they are holding their community-driven opinion poll where the player base gets to vote on what the developers will work on next. And from what I gather, these are a really big cornerstone of what has made OSRS so successful, that the community is kind of throwing their hat in the ring for what they want to see the game evolve into. That's pretty interesting and seems to be going well for them thus far. Also in the summer, they have the Blood Moon Rises with new story content, solo boss, and skilling activities. And then sometime in the autumn, they have this event called the Bingo Community Event. No idea. Again, I'm out of the loop on this one. Although I am tuned out of the whole world of OSRS, I find their success very appealing and leaving me very hopeful for what Blizzard could and hopefully will do with classic World of Warcraft. Keeping my fingers crossed Blizzard can do that. Alrighty, so this is far from a list of every MMO that you could play, of course. And please, if you have any strong recommendations for us, let us know in the comment section below. I just, in this video, wanted to cover the big ones that I had personal thoughts on, along with giving you an updated look at what's coming to these games in this year, 2026, and why you may or may not want to revisit any of these. And I will wrap up by saying this, it's all too common for us to focus on the next shiny object and ignore the ones we have right here to play with. Because the fact is, there are a lot of good MMOs alive and thriving right here, right now, and just because some of these might be 2 decades old, don't let that stop you from giving them a shot. If you have the time and you have the inclination, there are some fantastic experiences in this genre that you can have and enjoy here today. No need to wait for the Riot MMO or the next Kickstarter disaster. That's all for today. Thank you as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.